With the interpretation by Cantor Natalie Young of Ma Tovu, the traditional opening song and opening prayer, we wish all of you Shabbat Shalom and Good Yontif, Shana Tova. Welcome to our worship in this Rosh Hashannah morning. I'm Rabbi Norm Roman here at Beth Shalom Temple Center in Green Valley, Arizona. Some members of the congregation are here socially distanced appropriately and masked comfortably, we hope, here in the sanctuary. And we welcome those of you who are joining us at home in community centers as well. Our machzor, our prayer book, is Rabbi Richard Levy's On Wings of Awe. If you are welcome to follow along in reading and chanting. We're trying to blend in recognition of not only the traditional liturgy, but also the opportunities given to us by new technologies of live stream and YouTube and Zoom, bringing them all together in a worship service that reflects who and where we are in the face of the pandemic, but also who and where we are recognizing our connections across the generations and across the miles. So there are traditional prayers in the manner in which our people have recited them or chanted them or sung them for centuries, and there are new interpretations, as was Cantor Young's of Ma Tovu. There will be some that represent contemporary cantors and composers. There will be some melodies that represent different ethnic backgrounds, including we will conclude with an interpretation of Ein Keloheinu as it is sung in the Spanish, Portuguese, Judeo-Ladino interpretation. So we're trying to bring everyone together as much as we can, even though we are somewhat distanced. So again, words of welcome, and I invite you to participate in our worship to the extent that you are comfortable. I'll point out a few things as we continue through the worship. Some of you represent or come from backgrounds that may be a little more traditional, and recognizing that today is Shabbat as well as Rosh Hashannah, there are some aspects of the service that have additional insertions, and there are some things that are deferred from today until tomorrow for those who observe the second day of Rosh Hashanah. We'll point them out. What we have done is we have recorded especially the chanting and reciting of Avinu Malkeinu, as well as the shofar service. We've recorded those in advance, and those of you who wish to include them in your worship today are welcome to do so after we've joined with Ein Keloheinu, or you can defer, press your pause button if you will, and wait until tomorrow on the second day of Yontif, and then sing along with Avinu Malkeinu, as well as hear the sound of the shofar, which is the commandment for Rosh Hashannah. Finally, extending appreciation to those who have helped make all of these worship services possible. I'm reserving a long list of thank yous until the end on Yom Kippur, but today, especially for those of you who may have not heard the introduction last night, some of the music is provided by Cantor Ross Wollman of Temple Chai in Phoenix, and we're grateful for his having come down to our bima to record some of the cantorial solo pieces for us. Our worship begins this morning, the bottom of page 79. The bottom of page 79. Today on Rosh Hashanah, the world was conceived. Today on Shabbat, the world was completed. Today, every day, the world begins again. We see it new, more fully. We encounter an old branch of a tree we knew for years, as though its leaves and bark had never brushed our face before. Today, Shabbat, the world is perfect, not for us to change. Tradition asks us not to break that branch that bruised our walk, but let its leaves glisten in the same sun that warms us. Rosh Hashanah reminds us that everything is to grow, to change, to rise, to flower and wax as full and fat and gorgeous as it can become. And Shabbat reminds us that everything that is has value past as it is, with no change, leaf without flower, seed without stalk, each of us with all of our imperfections. Today the world began, charged to become everything that lies within the power of its creation. Today the world is complete, charged to embrace even the weakness of a life that is brushed by God. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Blessed are you who spoke and the world came into being. Blessed are you who keeps making creation. Blessed are you who speaks and acts. Blessed are you who decrees and fulfills. Blessed are you who is merciful to the land. Blessed are you who is merciful to all creatures, who rewards those who stand in awe of you, who lives and exists forever. Blessed is your name. Baruch Shemo. Traditional psalm and responsive chanting of the Ashrei prayers on page 93. This helps introduce our morning worship. If you are familiar with the melody and with the words, it actually is an acrostic following the Hebrew alphabet. I invite you to respond where appropriate, or if you're choosing just to listen, that's fine as well. Beginning on page 93. Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od yehalalucha selah. Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo, Ashrei ha'am sheronai Elohav, Tehillah leDavid. Aromimcha Elohai hamelech, va'avarcha shimcha leolam va'ed. V'chol yom avarcheka, v'halala shimcha leolam va'ed. Gadol Adonai umhulal meod, v'ligdulato ein cheker. Dor ledor yishabach ma'asecha, ugvurotecha yagidu. Hadar kevod hodecha, v'divrei niflotecha asicha. Ve'ezuz norotecha yomeru, ugdulatcha asaprena. Zecher rav tuvcha yabiu, v'tzidchatcha yiranenu. Chanun v'rachum Adonai, erech apayim ugdol chased. Tov Adonai lakol, v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. Yoducha Adonai kol ma'asecha, v'chasidecha yivarchucha. כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, וגבורותיו ידברו, להודיע לבני האדם גבורותיו, וכבוד הדר מלכותו. מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים. עיני כל אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעיתו. פותח את ידיך, ומשביע לכל חי רצון. צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו. קרוב אדוני לכל קוריו, לכל אשר יקראוהו באמת. רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם. שומר אדוני את כל אהביו, ואת כל הרשעים ישמיד. תהילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר שם קדשו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברכיה מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. Turning to page 111. Chatzi Kaddish, Kaddish Le'ela, page 111. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yom echon, uv'chayei chol beit Yisrael, Bahagala, uv'izman kariv, v'meru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach, Le'olam ololmei almaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shmei Kudsha, Brichu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shihirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Da mihiran b'halma, Imeru. Amen. On page 113, Baruch Hu, our call to worship. I invite you, if you are comfortable, to please rise. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha berachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Marabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mala ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, Ve'al me'orei or she'asita yifa'arucha sela. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkechu lanu mehera la'oro, Baruch ata Adonai yotzer ha'me'orot. Bottom of page 116. Continuing together in English, the bottom of page 116. With acts of great love, you embrace us, Adonai our God.
With acts of great mercy, you embrace us. You are our Father, for the sake of our own mothers and fathers who are in the war, who trusted you, who taught us all their life, accept us as your initiative. Sustain us with compassion. Give us a discerning heart that we might understand. Teach us our lessons to use you and each other, that we may learn and teach. Observe the same, all the words of your Torah.
V'ha'er eineinu b'toratecha, v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, v'yachel levaveinu le'ava u'yirat shemecha. V'ha'er eineinu b'toratecha, v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, ויחל לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש ולא נקלה ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. Continuing at the bottom of the page, give light for our eyes through your Torah, fasten our heart to your mitzvot, and unite our torn hearts that they may love you. Fill with awe at your name, and never anywhere in the world be ashamed. For in your name, holy, great, and awesome, have we placed our trust. May we rejoice and exult in the victories you will bring us over divisiveness and hatred, smallness and indifference, ignorance and fear. Bring us together towards shalom from the four corners of the earth, and escort us heads upright to that part of earth you call ours. For you, our God, bringing deliverance, choosing a different task for us from that which you have chosen for each other people and every tongue. You have brought us close to your great name through truth, that we may speak thankfully to you, proving your oneness through our love. You are praised, Adonai, choosing Israel your people through your love. Page 121. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vahed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vahed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Be seated. The words from Deuteronomy, Moses' farewell sermon, we call them the Via Hafta. Traditionally, there are 3 paragraphs. We are going to be including much of the first paragraph and then jumping to the end of the 3rd paragraph. So we'll begin in the middle of page 121, and then after the top of 122, we will continue at the bottom of 126. You'll be able to follow along, I'm sure. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uv'shachbecha uv'kumecha uv'kshartam leyot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha uchtabtam al mzuzot beitecha uvish arecha. The bottom of page 126. Leman tiskeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai Vitem kedoshim leloechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem le'elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Emet. Page 128, near the middle of the page. All Jews have their own Egypt. We must each free ourselves in our own way from the bonds that keep us from our true integrity. When that bond is burst, when we have ousted the illegitimate masters from our minds, then one day we each can come to God, each on our own ground, within our own flame, but each to the same ultimate reality whose power rules the sea, the earth, and each person's freely loving soul. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot osei fere. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot osei fere. Shira chadasha shibchu gehulim l'shimcha al sefat hayam. Yachad kulam hodu v'himlechu v'hameru Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Sur Yisrael, O Rock of Israel, come to Israel's help. Fulfill your promise of redemption for Judah and Israel. Our Redeemer is Adonai of hosts, the Holy One of Israel. Praised are you, O God, who will fulfill the time of redemption for Israel and all humanity. Baruch atah Adonai, Gaal Yisrael. Before we continue with our Tefillah Amidah Shmona Esrei, the central part of the worship service, a few comments to acknowledge for you and to remind you that because of not only the editorship and the way that this particular prayer book, this Machzor, was created for college campuses, actually for the Hillel foundations, and Rabbi Levy felt that it was important to include the familiar phrasing that people, students, or all worshipers might have from the communities from which they might have come. So some are familiar with a more traditional, some are more familiar with a liberal interpretation and wording of the next several paragraphs. So in addition to having or providing in the book for the option whether you might want to say Goel or Geulah, whether you might want to say Mechaye Metim rather than Mechaye Hakol. So the options are provided for you. May I also remind you that there are separate insertions, a little phrase here and there for Rosh Hashannah and Yom Kippur that we will be including in the chanting. So as I mentioned last night, remember the rabbinic adage from Pirkei Avot, don't just trust your rote memory for some of these prayers. Even though they sound familiar, there are some additions, insertions, and modifications for the holy days. So it's okay to be looking in the book rather than trying to convince everyone that you're so knowledgeable that you know it all by heart. So the first several paragraphs will be joining in chanting together. The ark will be open. Then there's a further longer insertion, and Cantor Woolman will be providing the musical rendition for us, and I'll explain further for those who don't remember the Unatana Tokef section of the Amidah and the Tefillah prayers. So we're on page 130. Again, I invite you to please rise if you are comfortable doing so, and we'll join in chanting carefully together. Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, spread wide my lips, and my mouth shall pour out your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, v'Elohei avoteinu v'imoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Koneh HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo V'Ahava. Zachrenu l'chaim, melech chafetz b'chaim, v'chotvenu b'sefer ha'chaim, l'mancha Elohim chaim. Melech ozer u'moshia u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Bezrat Sarah. Page 132. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye hakol ata rav lehoshia, Mechalkel chaim bechesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim v'rofei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umkahayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al givurot, Umidom melach, melech memit umchayeh, umatzmiach Yeshua, Michamocha al parachamim, Zocher yitzurav l'chaim berachamim, V'ne'eman atah l'hachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Continuing together, Adonai is forever mighty, restoring life to those marked out for death, liberating peoples once destined for defeat. Adonai is forever mighty, banishing despair through the loving acts of human beings, reviving barren hopes within the womb of weary dreamers, cutting loose the fetters of the victims fallen underneath the sickness of our days, remembering those passed over by the dust of time. May you extend your mighty hand to us, restoring us, banishing our despair, that from the dust of our uncaring age we might bring to bud those loving acts that make us human. We will be continuing the bottom of page 134. Permit me a moment to remind you of the legend, and it is only a legend, historically not to be questioned, but it has appeared in our liturgy and the literature for generations. At this point in the worship service in the city of Mainz in Germany, according to the legend, Rabbi Amnon, who had faced an Inquisition type of torture and challenge to his faith indeed challenged to his purpose of being. He struggled to ascend the bima in the synagogue and recited these words which we shall join in hearing, contemplating, deciding whether we accept them or not. Cantor Woolman will be singing some. We can read along with other words. Unetanet tokef kedushat hayom. It is time for us to declare the holiness of this day as we remember the year past, its tragedies, its sorrows, as we think about and intellectually and faithfully try to respond to the notion of the God who is the author of life, composing the lists of who shall live and who shall die in Sefer HaChaim, the Book of Life. The legend continues that as soon as he spoke these words, challenging his congregation and community, that Rabbi Amnon passed away on the bima. But in the legend, several days later, he reappeared to Rabbi Kalonimus, one of his students, one of his disciples. He appeared to him in a dream and taught his disciple and taught then all of the generations of the people of Israel the words and the faith of believing in the God that Rabbi Amnon defended. As we continue this morning, especially with these words, with this theme, and as we respond to it in our hearts, in our minds, and our souls, again, whether we accept this particular image of the author of life, the list of those who will live and who will die, we think back on this difficult year, those whom we have lost, those whom we remember, those who are remembered by others, and especially as well we include the name of our leader, our teacher, our judge, for this is indeed Yom Hadin, a day of judgment. And we acknowledge the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Page 134, keeping all of this in mind, we recognize that on this judgment day, an old legend relates that Rabbi Amnon of Mainz, dying of the tortures of the 11th century, saw God enthroned with the angelic host, determining in books of life and death the verdict of everyone on earth. His words, his vision, Unetanet Tokef, remains for us as a reminder that the world is more awe-filled than our finite gallery of profane sights, ordinary thoughts, and fears. It is a vaster realm of mystery and power, which makes a claim upon our lives and relates each one of us to spheres beyond our sight. Unetanet Tokef accounts with grim detail the fires, floods, great storms, cruel swords, whereby we each shall one day meet our own death. Yet also, how our own repentance and prayer and acts of human caring, teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, how these can mitigate the harshness of existence and elevate our survival to the plane of being gloriously human. That there are powers far beyond ourselves reminds us that because so much of life is not within our power, because nature and humanity can wreak such awful cruelty, just so must we struggle against all the cruelty we know, and never cease within our prayers to demand that the God who watched the tortures of Amnon of Mainz and all the slaughters in the ages since his own, bring quickly to an end the world's capacity for harm, and stir powerfully in the breasts of every creature repentance, prayer, and acts of human caring, teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah, all that can make the vision of a God who metes out justice become a reality once more.
תוקף קדושת היום הוא נורא ואיום ובו תינשא מלכותך וייכון בחסד כיסאך ותשב עליו באמת כי אתה הוא דיין ומוכיח יודע וחותם בסופר ומונה ותזכור כל הנשכחות ותפתח את ספר עקרונות ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות ומאליו יקרא וחותם יד כל אדם בו ובשופר גדול ייתקע וכל דממה דקה אל יישמע ומלאכים יחפזון וכיל הורדה יוחזון ומלאכים יחפזון וכיל הורדה יוחזון ויאמרו הנה יום הדין לבכות הצבא מרום בדין כי לא יזכו עיניך בדין כי לא יזכו עיניך בדין וחובי עולם יעברו לפניך כבני מרום. בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור ייכתבו בראש השנה ייכתבון וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון כמה יעברון וכמה יבוראון, מי יחיה ומי ימות, מי בקיצו ומי לא בקיצו. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. מי באש ומי במים, מי בחרב ומי בחיה, מי ברעב ומי בצמא, מי ברש ומי במגפה, מי בקניקה ומי בסקילה. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. מי ינוח ומי ינוע, מי ישקט ומי יתערף, מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי יעני ומי יאשר, מי יושפע ומי ירום. ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים את רוח הגזירה.
A translation from the Machzor, the High Holy Day Prayer Book of the Conservative Movement of North America. On Rosh Hashannah, we plunge like swimmers into a sea of words. On Yom Kippur, the sea rises, then crests, and we emerge sealed by the wax, warmed by the fire of braided candle. The new year is like a trailhead, opening wide before us, a day of fasting, narrow, breathless, so quick to close. We contemplate a new year, and this we know, some of us will live, and some of us will die. Some will die young, and some very old, some by water, and some by fire, some by sword, some by beast, some by hunger, and some by thirst, some by plague, and some by earthquake, some by stoning, and some by strangling. Some of us will feel at ease, some will be restless. Some will have peace of mind, some will have strife. Some will be tranquil, some will be tormented, some will be raised high, some will be brought low. Some will have riches, some will be impoverished. Even so, the way we act, the way we speak, the way we meet God's image in ourselves and in others, these things have great power to make our lives matter. Therefore, let us make whole the broken shards, green and thick the withering grass. Let the wind fill us with urgency for life. Let dreams give birth to justice and goodness. O God of holiness, God of hope, let us glimpse your truth as we attach our hope to yours. And at the bottom of page 140, our origin, we mortals, is the dust, and our end is the dust. At the cost of our lives we carry in our daily bread. We are like a broken shard, a withered reed, a fading flower, a shadow moving on, an ephemeral crowd, a passing breeze, dust flying up, a dream that flies away. But the clay remains, the stalk remains, the flower yet flutters in the breeze, and the dream is still remembered. For you are our majesty, the God of life, who lives forever. We rise. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, so along with the angels far above we declare the holiness of your presence in the world, just as it is declared in the highest heavens, as it is written by the prophet Isaiah, each called to the other saying, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzevaot, Melo chol haaretz kevodo. And then with a great and powerful rushing voice, they raise themselves opposite the seraphim, the angels, and cry, Praised be he, Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. From your place, O Majesty, appear and rule over us, for we await you. When will you rule in Zion? May your presence be felt soon in our own days and forever. Your holiness shall be felt in the midst of Jerusalem, your city, forever and ever to all eternity. And our eyes shall behold the reality of your rule, as it is said in the songs written of your power by King David, your righteous anointed one, Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohayich Tzion, Lador Vador, Hallelujah, Lador Vador, Nagid Godlecha. We shall tell our children of your greatness, and they will tell our grandchildren. In every generation till eternity, we shall proclaim your holiness, as did Rabbi Amnon. Our lips shall never abandon your praise, for your majesty is great and holy. Please be seated. We'll continue now from the middle of page 143 until page 154, the top of page 154. So 143 to 154 will continue silently, either with the words of tradition or the meditations, thoughts, and prayers of our own hearts.
וברכה, חן וחסד ורבים, שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל האחד. שים שלום, טובה חן וחסד ורחמים, ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד, באור הנחה. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, ושפע חיים, ברכה ושלום, ייזכר וניכתב לפניך על חיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים.
Many of you are perhaps aware that at this point in the morning worship service, we would be reciting and singing and praying Avinu Malkeinu, our forgiving parent, our sovereign. The tradition is that because this is a list of requests, to put it mildly, strong statements of, as we referred to them last night, gimme prayers, petitions, strong requests, not only for ourselves, but for all the people of Israel and indeed all humanity. And the tradition is that we try to avoid including too many of those type of requests and prayers and petitions on Shabbat. So in those communities in which there is a second day of Rosh Hashannah being observed, Avinu Malkeinu and as well the shofar service, which we would encounter after reading the Torah and the Haftarah, are deferred, postponed for a day. We have recorded those in advance for you, so those who wish to include them in your worship today, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, or on your only day of Rosh Hashanah, are welcome to do that, as it exists here, Avinu Malkeinu, beginning on page 158, and then also the shofar service, again, after the Torah and the Haftarah, and we'll comment about that in due time. But I do want to share one little image that comes from the Hasidic literature. Don't necessarily think of Avinu Malkeinu as a list or this long piece of the gimme prayers of God, we've been good, or God, we haven't been good during this past year, and so we pray that you'll respond to us positively in the year to come. The Hasidic Rebbe says, here's a much better image. God is like the storekeeper who has the things that we're going to need during the year up on the shelves. And on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we come into the store, as it were. I'll have one of those. I'll have one of those. I'll have one of those. But because it's Yontif, and I understand there's no consistency here, but because it's Yontif, I can't really afford to pay you today. So, dear shopkeeper, dear God, can I have some of that? Can I have some of that? Can I have some of that on credit? And during the year, I will try my best to pay you back for what you've given me. The Rebbe teaches that there's a little of this and a little of that and a little of this and a little of that available for all of us. We need to remember that we have been given the goodness on credit. And so during the year, with our acts of teshuvah and tefillah and tzedakah, is how we pay, as it were, the shopkeeper for all that we need in the year to come. So just another teaching, another thought, but we'll defer Avinu Malkeinu, that's page 158. We'll defer that either to later this morning or till tomorrow, or for that matter, whenever you wish to read the words and to hear Cantor Woolman and even join in singing along. On Yom Kippur, we'll be able to say them all together. So we turn now to page 163, our Torah service, page 163. Ein kamocha ba'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kema'asecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'hador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachahamim, heitiva v'rtzonecha et Zion, tivne chomot Yerushalayim, tivne chomot Yerushalayim, ki v'cha levad v'tachnu, melech el ram v'nisa, Adon olamim. Please rise. Vayihi binsoa ha'aron, vayomer Moshe, kuma Adonai, v'yafutzu oivecha, v'yanusu misanecha, mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Udevar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. The bottom of page 165. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh v'norah Shemo Gadlul Adonai iti Uneromima Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai HaGedula VeHaGevura VeHaTiferet VeHaNetzach VeHaHod Ki Chol Bashamayim Uvaretz Ki Chol Bashamayim Uvaretz Lecha Adonai HaMamlacha Ve'ani hitnaseh lechol rosh. Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, Vehishtachavu, Vehishtachavu, Lehar Kodsho, Lehar Kodsho, Ki Kadosh, Ki Kadosh, Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Please be seated. There are several traditions of the Parshiot, the Torah portions that should be read on Rosh Hashannah. Some that are identified specifically for the first day, some specifically for the second day, in order to set a context for the each story, one leading into the other. And then also there's a tradition amongst some communities to read Bereshit, to read the story of creation, as Rosh Hashanah is considered the anniversary of the creation of the world. This morning we'll be reading actually the section of the Torah of Bereshit in Genesis chapter 22, the binding of Isaac story. Normally or traditionally in most communities this is read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, but since we're not going to be having a formal worship service on the second day, we'll include this, which is the more familiar story for all of us in our reading today. You can follow along on the, I just have to find the exact pages where it is included in the Machzor, beginning on pages 174 in Hebrew, 175 in English. The Torah blessings are found on page 170, and for our Aliyah for the Torah, on behalf of the congregation and the community, we invite as our Kohen Sid Shapiro. Ya'amod levarech al Torah, Shemaya ben Tzvi HaKohen v'Chava Chazak.
Baruch Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher Baruchu
Asher Bacharman.
Asher Bachaman L'man Lanu Es Torah So Baruch Atah Adonai Nosei HaTorah.
Amen. You may want to take a step away because I don't have to ask her. Vayhi achar hadvarim ha'ele ve'elohim nisat Avraham. Vayomer elav Avraham, vayomer hineni. Vayomer kachna et bincha et yechidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak. V'lech lecha el ha'eretz hamoriah v'ha'alehu sham le'olah al echad ha'harim asher amar elecha. Vayeshkem Avraham baboker v'yachavosh et chamoro v'yikach et shnei ne'arav ito ve'et Yitzchak beno v'yivaka atzei olah v'yakom v'yelech el hamakom asher amar lo ha'elohim. V'yom ha'shlishi v'yisa Avraham et einav v'yar et hamakom merachok. V'yomer Avraham el ne'arav shvu lachem po im hachamor v'ani v'hana'ar nelcha ad ko v'nishtachaveh v'nashuva elechem. V'ikach Avraham et atzei ha'olah v'yasem el Yitzchak beno v'yikach biyado et ha'esh ve'et ha'ma'achelet v'yelchu shnehem yachdav. V'yomer Yitzchak el Avraham aviv v'yomer aviv v'yomer hineni b'ni v'yomer hinei ha'esh v'ha'etzim v'ayeh ha'sela olah v'yomer Avraham Elohim yir'elo ha'sela olah b'ni v'yelchu shnehem yachdav. V'yavohu el hamakom asher amar lo ha'elohim v'yiven sham Avraham et ha'mizbeach v'ya'aroch et ha'etzim v'ya'akod et Yitzchak beno v'yasem ito al ha'mizbeach mima'al etzim v'yishlach Avraham et yado v'yikach et ha'ma'achelet l'shachet et beno v'yikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim v'yomer Avraham v'yomer hineni v'yomer al tishlach yadcha el hana'ar v'al ta'as lo me'uma ki ata yadati ki yirei Elohim ata v'lo chasachta et bincha et yechidcha mimeni v'yisa Avraham et einav v'yar v'hinei ayel achar nechaz basvach v'karnav v'yelech Avraham v'yikach et ha'ayil v'yahalehu le'olah tachat beno v'yikra Avraham shem hamakom hahu Adonai yira'eh asher ye'amer hayom bahar Adonai yira'eh v'yikra malach Adonai el Avraham shenit min hashamayim v'yomer binishbati ne'um Adonai ki ya'an asher asita et hadavar hazeh v'lo chasachta et bincha et yachidcha ki varecha varechecha v'harbe arbe et zaracha kechochvei hashamayim v'chol asher al sfat hayam v'yirash zaracha et sha'ar oivav v'hitbaruchu v'zaracha kol goyei haaretz ekev asher ata shamata b'koli v'yeshev Avraham el ne'arav v'yakumu v'yelchu yachdav el be'er shava v'yeshev Avraham b'be'er shava.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Nosa Lanu Taras Emes B'Kayeh Alulam Nota B'Sulfenu Baruch Atah Adonai Nosei HaTorah.
Amen. Amen. Yeshkoach. Thank you, sir. Michael, if you'd come again to assist. Vizot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei bnei Yisrael, al ki Adonai, biyad Moshe. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, haolam omed. Al shlosha devarim, put it down or hold it. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, haolam omed. Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gimilut chasadim. Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gimilut chasadim. Let's be seated. Page 177. Now with the Torah before us, God's words fill this room. We comfort Sarah and Rachel, Hagar and Hannah. We restore life to Isaac and we ease Abraham's pain. May the God who healed so many of our ancestors bring healing to our loved ones too, heralding the new year with an easing of their pain, welcoming a new era of relief from suffering for them and those who care for them. Elna Rafana Allah, Moses prayed for Miriam, please heal her. His words are on our lips too. Rafana Lahem, please heal them. As we fill this room with the names of those who hurt, those whom we so love. In our community, we think of and we pray for Shlemut, for healing and wholeness, for Chris Anderson, Harvey Beam, Irene Case, Alan Delman, Heidi Demarest, Jerry Gale Feldman, Melissa Feldman, Helene Fields, Lori Fly, Jeffrey Saul Gervan, Kay Grask, Carl Herbst, Larry Hoffman Rosenfeld, Rebecca Holleran, Teresa Holleran, Bo Jessup, Dawn Kitts, Aggie Klieger, Sharon Laws, Billy Lawson, Werner Lawson, Dory Lessa, Tim Orrick, Bernie Pincus and Marley Pincus, Eric Rottenberg, Dory Roman, Mel Roman, Nancy Schwam, Abraham Raphael Ben Shoshana, Lori Sherman, Lou Simon, Linda Smith, and Ruth Stevens. Those who are at home, if there are names you wish to mention, either in your hearts or publicly, please do so, as well as those in the sanctuary, if there are names you wish to add, please.
Dr. Schwartz. Jim Dixon.
May they know refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, renewal of our bodies and our spirits. The Mishaberach Lacholim, the manner in which we sing it, the top of page 179. Mishaberach Avoteinu Mekor habracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Yisheberach Imotenu Mekor habracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema. the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Page 182. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek. And our Haftarah, Prophet Jeremiah, beginning on pages 188 and 189. Ko amar Adonai matzachen b'midbar, so speaks Adonai. The people who has survived the sword has found grace in the wilderness on Israel's way to seek repose. From that far time Adonai appeared, an eternal love I loved you, and so I have drawn you to me in a covenant of love. I shall build you up again, and you shall be rebuilt, O damsel Israel. Again you shall dress up with timbrel drums and go forth to join playful dance. Again you shall plant vineyards on Samaria's hillsides, and having planted them, the planters shall eat of their fruit. For there will be a day when those who stand guard on the hills of Ephraim shall call out, Arise, let us go up to Zion, to Adonai our God. Kumu v'na'alet Sion el Adonai Eloheinu. So speaks Adonai. Sing joyously for Jacob, shout on the heights of all the nations, proclaim in exultation, save your people, Adonai, the remnant of Israel. Here I am bringing them from the land of the north, gathering them from the corners of the earth, the blind and the lame among them, pregnant women together with women giving birth. What a great congregation is returning here. Shimu devar Adonai goyim v'hagidu b'iyim. They come weeping, I lead them with compassion, I lead them to streams of water on a straight road, that they might not stumble. For I have become a parent to Israel, to my firstborn Ephraim. Hear the word of Adonai, O nations. Tell this tale to the islands far away. The one who scattered Israel is gathering them up, protecting them like a shepherd for his flock. For Adonai has ransomed Jacob and redeemed them from hands stronger than his own. They shall come singing to the heights of Zion, streaming brightly to God's goodness with grain and wine and oil. And the newborn of the flocks and herds, their life will become a garden well watered. They will feel weak no longer. Then shall damsels dance for joy, young men and old along with them. I shall turn their mourning into rejoicing. I shall bring comfort and celebration out of their pain. I shall satisfy priestly appetites with abundance, and my people shall be sated with my goodness, says Adonai. So says Adonai. A voice is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping. Rachel weeps for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are no more. But so says Adonai, take away the weeping from your voice, the tears from your eyes. For there will be a reward for your labor, says Adonai. They will return from the land of the enemies. There will be hope for your future, says Adonai. Your children will return to their own borders. I have listened carefully to the wandering Ephraim as he bewailed his plight. You have chastised me, and I have felt chastised like a calf untrained, biting me back. Bring me back, and I shall come back. For you, Adonai, are my God. For after I returned, I repented, and after I was enlightened, I struck my thigh. I am ashamed, I am abashed, for I bear the disgrace of my youth. But is not Ephraim my beloved child, the youngster of my delights? Whenever I speak of him, it is as though he were still present before me. so my inmost being yearns for him. I will treat him with great compassion, says Adonai. Me'i lo rachem arachamem ne'um Adonai. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'medaber u'mkayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu ve'emanim devarecha, v'davar echad midvarecha, achor lo yashuv rekam, ki el melech na'aman v'rachaman ata, baruch ata Adonai, ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav. Rachem al Tzion ki hi beit chayenu, v'la'avolat nafesh toshia b'mhera v'yameinu, baruch ata Adonai, misameach Tzion b'vaneha. Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu b'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha u'malchut Beit David mishichecha b'meira yavo v'yagel liveinu al kiso lo yashu lashev zar lo yenchelu od acharim et kevodo ki v'shem kodshecha nishpata lo shelo yichaber nero leolam va'ed baruch ata Adonai Magen David, al haTorah, ve'al ha'avodah, ve'al ha'nevi'im, ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, ve'al yom ha'zikaron hazeh, shenatata lahanu, Adonai Eloheinu, likdusha v'limnucha, lechavod ultifaret, al hakol, Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach, umvarchim otach, Yitbarach shimcha b'fi kol chai, tamid leolam va'ed, udvarcha emet v'kayam la'ad, baruch ata Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh ha-shabbat, v'Yisrael, v'yom hazikaron. Amen. Again, at this point, as you can see on page 196, we would begin our shofar service, 3 sections composed by Rav in the 3rd century of the Common Era. Rav was a Babylonian teacher, a student of Judah the Prince, who compiled the Mishnah. There are 3 sections, Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofarot. We have recorded, thanks to Mike Finkelstein, our professional shofar blower. So we've recorded in advance the shofar service for those who wish to view it on. It's a YouTube, right? It's a YouTube that's recorded. If you wish to view it today, if you wish to view it tomorrow, including the Tekiah, the Shavrarim, Teruah, and not only the Tekiah again, but at the end, a Tekiah Gedolah, and I'll give you a little hint in advance. It's a good one. It's a good Tekiah Gedolah. Okay? To be repeated again at the end of Nila and Yom Kippur. But we invite you to enjoy and worship with the shofar service that begins on page 196, whenever you choose to include those prayers and those sounds in your celebration of the day. We turn now to page 212. Page 212. We rise to return the Torah to the ark. Yehalalu et Shem Adonai ki niskav shemo levado. We praise the name of God, the most exalted name of all. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim vayarem keren le'amo tehila lechol chasidav livnei Yisrael am kirovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Middle of page 2013. Eitz chaim hi lemachazikim ba v'tomecheha meyusha deracheha דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם. Shkoch, Michael, thank you. Please be seated. Friends, I've only been the rabbi here since January. And especially, sadly, in light of the COVID-19 situation, you haven't met much of my family yet. But I have this cousin, Izzy. Izzy's been around for a long time. He lives quite far away, so we don't get to see him very often, even in the days of frequent flyer miles, Skype, FaceTime, Zoom. In fact, most of the families never met him in person. Lynn and our children have. My father did, but my mother never did. Most of my uncles and aunts never met Izzy either. Only 2 of my cousins had what they and I call the privilege of being introduced to our special cousin, Izzy. You see, for most of the family, Izzy just exists in stories and vague memories of experiences that others through the years have had with him. Which means, of course, that there's a lot of exaggeration. It means as well that some of the stories and memories are blown out of proportion, or they're told incorrectly. Some of the family even feels that they have to apologize for Izzy's behavior. Some find it difficult to explain what he does or says. And when we would gather together, there would be expressions of regret and disappointment or dismay. Oh, Izzy, look what he's done now. There are Izzy fans in the family. There are Izzy detractors in the family. And there are many who would just care less. Think about Izzy and say, Dayenu, even though it's the wrong holiday. See, I have this cousin Izzy. He does his own thing. His life has seen tragedy and accomplishment. There are times when he has earned the legends told about him, and there have been times when our only reaction could possibly be, oh no, is he? But even though he's far away, his presence is always felt. His name is always coming up in family discussions and even among people who really don't know him at all. Izzy lives in a very tough neighborhood, a very, very tough neighborhood. Some question why, but that's where he felt, that's where he knew that he belonged. He was attacked because his lifestyle was different. His way of talking and singing and dancing were all different. He was attacked time and time again, and whenever he fought back, everyone said that the fight was always his fault. But Izzy stuck around. He even reached out his hand very cautiously, and he continued to offer that hand in friendship, as long as it wasn't perceived as a surrender. He continued to offer help when his neighbors were in trouble, even if they didn't particularly like him. So some people were able to tell his stories. Do you remember when Izzy did this? Do you remember when Izzy was responsible for that? in times of youthful innocence, his, mine, ours. Izzy was amazing. He could do anything. He was brash. He had chutzpah. He was courageous. He risked his life more than once to rescue long-life family members, to save quite a few lonely, desperate people, even some whom he had never met or heard of before. Izzy has gotten used to being singled out, criticized for what seemed to us to be totally ridiculous reasons. Some are ready to give up defending him. Family tradition is filled with experiences of those who were accepted and those who weren't. Not everyone among the relatives is willing to accept Izzy. Some even turn their backs on him. Too many of the stories just don't fit comfortably into the family patterns. He's a bully. He's a troublemaker, some say, a rabble-rouser. He should be more appreciative of what we've done for him through the years, others say. Why can't he be more like us? We have so much to worry about here. Izzy will just have to manage on his own. Dayenu. Dayenu with Izzy, they say. But some of us still think about Izzy. Some of us still insist that he's part of the family, an important part. Some of us still tell stories about him and look forward to seeing him on occasion, because there's much to learn about who we are and who we still can be. There's a little bit of each of us in Izzy, and there needs to be a lot of Izzy in each of us. Okay, I don't really have a cousin named Izzy. Those who know me and my patterns, most of you don't yet. God willing, you will. You could discern that I'm not talking about a cousin, but I'm talking about a place. Talking about Israel. The stories, the legends, the regrets, the disappointments, the achievements, the pride, the criticisms, the propaganda. Not a person named Izzy, but a part of each of us called Israel. You will find that on most years I choose to speak about that place, her battles, both external and internal, her glories, as a spiritual center for modern Judaism, as the meeting place of Jews from all over the globe, as a laboratory for scientific and philosophical discovery. I encourage all of you, when you can, to visit Israel, to read up about Israel, to invest in Israel, to be a part of the excitement that uniquely is Israel. For, as I said about getting to know Izzy and keeping him as part of our family, there's much to learn about who we are and who we still can be. There's a little bit of each of us in Israel, and there needs to be a lot of Israel in each of us. Most of you know that the anticipated, expected architectural presentation of a synagogue sanctuary in North America is to face east. Okay, ours is a little southeast, I believe. Don't all Jews face east when they pray? Actually, no. Only synagogues to the west of Jerusalem face east. Those to the north of Jerusalem face south. My friend Mike Rogoff, his home congregation, though he lives in Jerusalem now, his home congregation is Cape Town, South Africa, and they face north. We all, as Jews, don't face the same direction, but we do face the same place. Jews are like the spokes on a wheel around the world, facing one center of the hub, the heart of the Jewish people, of Am Yisrael. We are all, especially during these high holy days, parts of a great wheel focused on that one spot. wherever we may be in the world, in whatever holy space, a sanctuary or our own homes, we are still one big kahal, one Adat Yisrael, one big family, all looking together at the same place. Come there with me for a moment now. In your mind's eye, look east, across the deserts, across the mountains, the forests, the cities of the southern United States. Look across the Atlantic, then the Mediterranean Sea. There's the coastline of the modern state of Israel, the sands of the beaches near Tel Aviv. Then there are the flatlands and the kibbutzim and the moshavim, farms, villages, and towns. Go beyond them up into the Judean hills, following the spoke of the wheel that does continue east. Past Latrun, where 6,000 new citizens of Israel died fighting in 1948. Past the Elah Valley, where 3,000 years earlier, a young shepherd named David slew Goliath to lay further historic claim to the land. And even earlier, to the promise of God to Abraham and his descendants, referred to in the Torah. See burnt-out tanks and memorials to the Air Force on the side of the roads. See magnificent vista of ancient and modern Jerusalem sitting on the top of the Judean hills. Enter the capital city of our souls, now underneath the shining bridge that looks like a harp, the very same one that David used to sing his songs for Shalom al Yisrael, for peace over Israel. Then take Jaffa Road down all the way to the Old City. Make your way through the Christian Quarter, the Arab Shuk. You walk out into a large plaza and see the Kotel, the Western Wall itself. That's what we're all facing today, wherever we may be. From every spoke in the wheels of thousands of Jewish communities, we're all thinking of that hub at this moment. And all of us, liberal Jews, Hasidic Jews, secular Jews, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, we are all one congregation, quoting Psalm 128 that David played and sang along with that harp. Yivarechecha Adonai mitzion, ure'ei betuv Yerushalayim kol yemei chayecha, ure'ei vanim levanecha shalom al Yisrael. May God bless you all out of Zion. May you see the goodness of Jerusalem all your days. May you see your children's children and all who will know peace over Israel. Shalom al Yisrael, peace over Israel, an easy but old as time phrase, the hope, the dream, and the prayer. How many times as a rabbi giving sermons on Rosh Hashannah and Yom Kippur have I included those words? How many times have I sung them, even with my own copyrighted and recorded melody? How many times have I ended a letter or a post or an email, closing my eyes and saying, Shalom al Yisrael, peace over Israel, im yirtzeh Hashem, please God. But today I also want to add just a few comments about recent developments and the agreements that are known as the Abraham Accords, just signed this week in Washington at the White House. They aren't exactly peace treaties, but they are definitely steps in the right direction. So 5 basic things that I wish to state quickly. And of course, you're welcome to disagree, agreeably, please. First, President Trump and Jared Kushner do deserve some credit for bringing the Israelis, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain to the table. Their blustering and pushy style brought into daylight quite a few years of high-level, behind-the-scenes, dark contacts. Maybe this was just the right time. Maybe it was good luck. Maybe it was somehow an astute, shrewd economic political strategy, but credit is here given where credit is due. Benjamin Netanyahu's success in this matter is, I believe, primarily a reflection of his longevity in his position as prime minister. Despite strong opposition parties, coalition instability, and accusation of corruption. Because ironically, those are the factors that impress the Arab leaders. That's their situation also. Many are rulers for life, so they respect and identify with Bibi's surprising long tenure. Recognizing, on the other hand, that he has been elected and re-elected through a democratic process, whereas the governments of the UAE and Bahrain, not to mention all the other Arab countries, are not. Third, these Abraham Accords are more of a business alliance than a peace treaty. As a matter of fact, the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, not only hasn't approved the agreements, they haven't yet even been informed of all the details. Remember, there are no shared borders between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain. There are no negotiable territories here. Israel is now seen by these several more moderate Arab states not as a pariah, but as a model of economic vitality, a source of fiscal investment and technological advance. The reality is that this new situation puts more pressure on the Palestinians. In the words of one Israeli journalist, it calls out to them, join the future or remain stuck in the past. Informal and unofficial opinion polls indicate small but growing support among the populations of Gaza and the West Bank to change the Palestinian leadership in favor of those who demonstrate courage and common sense and accountability. And like all of these comments, much remains yet to be seen. And lastly, I personally doubt that this initiative, contrary to the promises of our president, I doubt that they will have much impact on the United States elections in early November. Those who support Mr. Trump will stay strong and continue to do so. Those who don't will acknowledge their gratitude for these positive moves in the Middle East, remembering that Cousin Izzy's is a very tough neighborhood. But most American Jews don't vote based on Israel issue alone. Even Joe Biden praised these agreements as being important for America. May they be a step towards peace. So I have a cousin named Izzy. I don't get to see him as often as I would like, but I hear stories about him all the time. Some of those stories make me very proud and some make me very angry. Yet, he's family. Even though he's far away, he's suffered a lot, but so have we all. Until I see him again, I'm going to make sure that he's not forgotten. As the psalmist said, "L'ma'an achai v're'ai," for the sake of my brothers and sisters and friends, adabra shalom bach. I will continue to speak of shalom, of peace for Israel. I was taken by a suggestion that was published about 10 years ago by Synagogue 3000. A teacher of mine said, we can approach Israel like a Jewish text, a sacred text. We Jews know a thing or two about how to read, discuss, teach, learn, and draw meaning from text. We know how to deal with a text that we don't understand. We know how to grapple with a text we find problematic. We know how to incorporate the idea of text into our own lives. We know how to juxtapose texts to make them more than the sum of their parts. What we should do is see Israel as a collection of voices conversing about some of the really big issues of modern Jewish existence. So friends, in a generation where more and more of our people are distancing themselves from Israel as a homeland, as a destination, as a source of excitement and Jewish pride, I urge you to join with me in engaging Israel through conversation, through exploration, in study, in debate, in worship, in, we pray, personal travel if possible. I want you to meet my cousin Izzy. I want you and your children and your children's children, Ur'ei v'tuv Yerushalayim kol yemei chayecha, to see the goodness of Jerusalem all your days, to see and to share in Shalom al Yisrael, in peace over Israel. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Our YouTube is a singing of the prayer for the state of Israel.
מוכנים? 3, 2, 1.
אבינו, אבינו, שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. אבינו, אבינו, שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. ברך, ברך את מדינת ישראל, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו, הגן עליה בעברת חסדך, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך. אבינו, אבינו, שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. אבינו, אבינו, שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. ושלח אורך עמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה ויועציה, ותקנה בעצה טובה מלפניך, ותקנה בעצה טובה מלפניך, ונאמר,
We continue with our prayers of Aleinu, of adoration, memorial Kaddish, beginning on page 214. Page 214, please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, v'atekenu la'liyotzeh b'reshit, שלא עשינו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים עמהו, ושכינתו זו ושכינת זו בגובי מרומים, ואלוהינו אינו, אמת מלכנו ופסולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום, והשבותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינו. Page 215. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Dear God, you give us dear ones, you make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart from us and leave us bereaved, but you are a living source of healing. To you the stricken look for comfort and sorrow-laden for consolation. On this solemn day of Rosh Hashannah, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love abides, the soul abides, as you, O God, abide forever. We see that our years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a pattern of life that is timeless. They unite us with a world that is from end to end the abode of your love, the vesture of your glory. In life and death we cannot go where you are not. Where you are, all is well. We are sustained by this assurance. We praise your name, O God of life. In our community, this congregation, on this Shabbat and Yom Hadin, this day of memory and day of judgment, we call to mind and honor the memories of those who have been taken from our midst, even during this past week, this past month. And we honor those, the anniversary of whose death we observe on this, the anniversary of their passing, their yortzeit. We remember Marion Friedman, Ralph Block, Sarah Deitch, Terry Freed, Jeannie Gordon, Michelle Kohana, Janelle Mitchell, Jim Mardinley, Faye Starr, Bud Stein, Ted Walden, Stephen Weig, Yetta Weston, Alan Winfield, and Loretta Ziegelman. We honor the memories of Max Beam and Ruth Gassman, Saul Goldstein, Sophie Greenblatt Levine, Sheila Liebson, Daniel Marin, Irving Marin, Ray Levinson Miller, Philip Rosenberg, Irving Schiffman, Mort Sider, David Serrata, Frank Stein, Peggy Tadman and Penny Tadman, Leonard Wallach, Lorraine Weintraub, and Ari Shlomo Zimmelman. To those at home, those in the sanctuary, if there are other names you wish to mention, as we wish them a sense of eternal bliss and peace. Zichronam livracha, may their memories truly be for a source of blessing. Memorial Kaddish, Kaddish Yatom, on page 216. Our tradition is to rise in sympathy with those who mourn and together recite words hallowed by centuries of faith. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'chayedecho beit Yisrael, b'galav v'zman kariv v'imru amen, Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam ul'olmei olmaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, Vitadar, Vitalev, Vitalal, Shmeid, Kutsha, Barichu, La'ela min kol bir chata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol b'nei adam v'imru amen. May there be a great peace from heaven and life for us and for all Israel. May the one who makes peace in the high places make peace for us, all Israel, and all humankind. And we say, Amen. Please be seated for a moment. Again, my words of appreciation to those who have participated in the worship celebrating Rosh Hashannah for the year 5781. If you choose to join in Avinu Malkeinu and the shofar service now, you can turn to those YouTube links in a few moments, or if you wish to add those in tomorrow morning, whether you view this entire worship service or just those particular sections, again, we're glad that we have the opportunity to do so. This afternoon at 4 o'clock at Sarita Lake, we have a Tashlich ritual, casting away our sins traditionally and symbolically. On Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., we have our Kever Avot memorial service at the Green Valley Cemetery. And in anticipation of Yom Kippur, which will be next Sunday evening and all day on Monday, and watch for your emails and information about the various times of services and what will be scheduled during the day. I want to also ask you and invite you to participate in a little minhag, a little custom of mine. We will include at the Yizkor service, which will be right a little after noon on Yom Kippur, we will include a list of all those who have died in the past year, family members, dear friends, those whom you remember, who have died since Yom Kippur a year ago. We'll include those names. If you're not sure if we do have that name, please be in touch with Ruth Ann or with me or with Stacy in the office or Joyce Finkelstein. But also, if you've had in your extended family, if you've had a new baby that's been born, or if you've adopted, your children, grandchildren, cousins, nieces, nephews, while we acknowledge and remember those who have died, let's also share a communal mazel tov to those who have brought new life into our community as well. So if you have a name to share, either send it on to us during the week, or I'll ask anyone to call out a name and we'll all yell a few mazel tovs on the day of Yom Kippur as well. It is, I'm fond of saying, not only the Day of Atonement, but if you pronounce it as a day of at-one-ment, for us to feel at one with God and feel at one with each other. So not only do we mourn, and not only do we ask forgiveness, but we also can add a touch of celebration during the day as well. Our closing song is Ein Keloheinu, and I invite you to listen to the Judeo-Spanish Ladino interpretation of Ein Keloheinu, and with these words of praise, the medieval hymn, we will conclude our worship being together. You can pick up the melody.
This is another version of En Keloheinu. This is the Judeo-Spanish tradition, which is the Turkish tradition, and is a combination of Hebrew and Ladino. En Keloheinu, En Kadonenu, En Kemalkeinu, En Kemoshienu, non como nuestro Dios, non como nuestro Señor, non como nuestro Rey, non como nuestro Salvador. Mi Keloheinu, mi Kadonenu, mi Kemalkeinu, mi Kemoshienu, ken como nuestro Dios. quien como nuestro Señor, quien como nuestro Rey, quien como nuestro Salvador. No del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Malkeinu, no del Moshienu, lo haremos a nuestro Dios, lo haremos a nuestro Señor, lo haremos a nuestro Rey, lo haremos a nuestro Salvador. Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, bendito nuestro Dios, bendito nuestro Señor, bendito nuestro Rey, bendito nuestro Salvador. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, tú sos nuestro Dios. Tú sos nuestro Señor, tú sos nuestro Rey, tú sos nuestro Salvador.
L'shana tova tikatevu. May we all be blessed with a good, healthy, sweet new year. Shabbat shalom.